Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe you take your snack and find a seat. We would like to welcome you very much from the Department Social Design, Arts as Urban Innovation to our Focus Week about liquid identities. And first of all, I would like to thank you for coming. I would like to welcome our presenters, and I also would like to thank everybody who made it possible that this Focus Week works that well. First of all, Martin Färber, who was very important to organize all things for this Focus Week in a very good collaboration with Alessia, with the posters. Thank you very much. And also Anna-Lena and the social design team, and also our communication team from the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. Social Design, Arts as Urban Innovation is a department of the Institute of Art and Society at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. And we are having now the first Focus Week on arts, design and architecture.
And I'm going to say something about the theme, which is liquid identities, and it's actually reacting on current situations in many ways. It's considering on the one side the digital age, and also like what does it mean to be a person in a digital age, like what does it shift in our perception of personalities. Also, like the nomadic lifestyles that many of us, like we travel each day. We start living on different places, we start to develop like different identities, and also of course like the really actual issue of the refugees, which all of you I think couldn't not see. And so coming from all these backgrounds and like that dissolvement, I would say, of identities in the usual way, we thought liquid identities actually is a good cover, or like a good roof for that. First of all, I will tell you like who actually came here. It's in the first place Nikolaus Gansterer. He's an artist. I will tell a bit more then afterwards. Then Pablo Caldero and Salazar. He came to us from Brussels. He's a designer. And Alexander Hagner on the left. And he's an architect, also practicing in Vienna. And the first talk will be held by Nikolaus Gansterer. So, first of all, I have to explain that. There's a short detail in between. I will show you.
So we thought it's 100 years of Dada, and it's kind of boring to ask questions, like afterwards to ask the audience for questions. So our idea is you found little papers on the place where you're sitting and pencils, and we would ask you during the speeches, if you have any questions you're interested in, you write down the question on this piece of paper, and after each lecture we will go through and we will ask you to give your question into this bucket. And after the 3 speeches, we will collect all the questions, and the 3 lecturers will take 1 question out and answer and discuss, and then the second question. This is the idea of the project.
So I'm going to introduce the first guest, Nikolaus Gansterer. A short biography here. He was born in 1974 in Austria, and he studied transmedia art at the University of Applied Arts here. Completed his post-academic studies in the Jan van Eyck Academy in Maastricht in the Netherlands, and he is co-founder of the Institute of Transacoustic Research and the Vegetable Orchestra, some of you might know. Currently, he's a lecturer at the Institute for Transmedia Art and a visiting professor at the Center of Research Focus in the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. And he's internationally active in performances, exhibitions, and lectures. As an artist and performer, Nikolaus is deeply interested in the links between drawing, thinking, and action. And in his visual work, he focuses on mapping processes emerging out of cultural and scientific networks. unfolding their immanent structures and interconnectedness. And by rejecting a strict differentiation of these two areas and through a consequent recombination of methods and settings from both fields, he arrives at distinct lines of connection and division, questioning the imaginary threshold between nature and culture and philosophy. Yeah, and I would leave it like this and pass the word to you. And yeah, I wish you a good first lecture and see you in a bit. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for coming and thank you for inviting me to this focus week, which we will, can you hear me? Yes, yeah, I think so. Which we will have in the next days. I have the honor to start here and to highlight a bit what could be understood under the term of liquid identities. So for me, when I got the invitation, I was questioning myself, what are liquid identities? And I took it as a provocation for myself to look through different projects I have done and to see in how far they, so to say, reverberate the theme. Is that running by itself or have I pushed the button? No, it should not. Just want to. So I was saying I looked through different projects and of mine and looked how they, so to say, reverberate with this topic of liquid identities. As mentioned in the beginning, I have a practice of being an artist, performer, and also a researcher. I'm also doing a research project here at the University of Applied Arts, a PEAK project, which I will talk later about. And I have an ongoing practice of drawing, performing, space making. In order to inquire this relational and intertwined space between thinking and drawing, as Martin said, especially in and through action. Personally, I share a deep interest in this fluent threshold zone between thinking, drawing, knowing, and also what I think is really important, unknowing, or not knowing, or not yet knowing. My interest is mapping these in-between spaces, so I'm cultivating a practice where space is not an abstract or theoretical entity out there, but a vivid field of forces to be inhabited with the whole body, with all my senses, becoming with a very process-orientated practice, which is gaining momentum exactly here, where space is becoming at once result and cause, product and producer. I'm interested in a circular and autopoetic system, to coin a word from Varela, here where rather presence than representation is able to emerge. For me, this dynamic dimension means that space and time are not regarded as neutral containers, but as fundamental co-producers, or you could even say collaborators, or contemporaries, like in German we have the word Zeitgenosse, which I think is a very interesting concept to enjoy time together. So space and time as Zeitgenossen, because space and time are playing a constitutive role in shaping our social and intersubjective processes that again determine the trinity of the representation of space, spatial practices, and the representational spaces. At least that's how the French philosopher Henri Lefebvre has put it. Based on a selection of work and projects, I hope to contribute to the discourse of this focus week on liquid identities. And as I said in the beginning, but what are liquid identities? I hope we will find it out together. How to approach them from an artist point of view. My practice is deeply rooted in an interest for diagrammatics. Herewith, drawing serves as a tool of starting thinking around a subject, around an object, becoming a project. For me, each of my projects I would describe as figures of research, figures to form or to test something, figures to exemplify a specific practice in reflection to this dynamic space-time thing. My space-time, your space-time, coexists with endless space-times inhabited by other living beings and things floating in this liquid sea of what we call reality. All these forms and shapes are in a continuous process of meeting, overlapping, colliding, merging, dividing, in endless movements, in endless connections, with endless new configurations. Here, drawing serves to me as an essential embodied practice. I'm interested in the act of drawing, generating again a body of work, visualizing in an immediate way, not only for me, but also for you and for others. From there, the body of work unfolds, and often lines of the thought turn into lines of things. When they become material, they literally start to matter. This is a performance I did, which has the title Thinking Matters, Other Others, which worked with expanded drawing, drawing beyond, thinking further, becoming a matter of fact. Here, drawing becomes a tool to inquire spaces. Drawing as a space shuttle, as a vehicle to ride on, as a machine to question, as an organ to communicate with. I'm specifically interested in this notion and the meaning of the term figure. The figure itself and the figurative have for sure a long tradition in the arts. Rather than following the track of the classical figurative, I would concentrate with my work on its diagrammatic meaning, in a more dynamic sense, in something vivid, something fluid, something liquid, something which moves and makes you move, makes us move together. What is the character of diagrams? Do diagrams have liquid identities? How can they be comprehended? I would suggest we follow Roland Barthes, that they can be conceived as figures. In his book Fragmente einer Sprache der Liebe, A Lover's Discourse, he writes, we can call all these fragments of speech figures, understood not in its rhetorical sense, but in a much more lively sense, rather in its choreographic acceptation, similar to a body's gesture, caught in action. For me, it is exactly this dialectic moment when lines of thought assume shape in space, they materialize, they solidify, and then they turn again into figures of thought. They liquefy. But what is drawing? In German, the word drawing, Zeichnung, for French design, or to design, relates etymologically to a complex semantic cluster of diverse meanings. Das Zeichen, the noun, means a mark, a sign, a signal, a symbol, a figure, a token, a note, and even an omen that arises, emerges, drawing as something assuming shape whilst appearing. Etwas erscheint, which means and seems to shine and shimmer, playing with appearances, oscillating between seeing, thinking, remembering, and imagining, something illuminating, like wonder, something, das wundert oder auch verwundert, calling for a wound, a sign like a rupture in the ongoing flowing liquid space-time continuum, like a miracle. Ah, yes. Designer, mit etwas auf etwas zeichnen, designing, ein Zeichen setzen. But the verb zeichnen also means zeigen, to show something, the gesture of showing, because the show must go on and on. But drawing as showing is also carrying the meaning of zeigen, to accuse, anklagen, putting the finger on something or somebody, raising and lifting the finger, to point out, to question, to search, to research, and to find. What? A cause, a case, of course. The world is everything that is the case. In any case, drawing means ziehen, to drag, to pull, to draw a line on a surface, to draw a line in space, T.R.A.D.E.R.S, to leave a trace in space, traces of spaces, of other species, or species of spaces, and other pieces, spaces, cases, traces, all towards a line of what Deleuze called a line with variable directions, which trace no contour and delimit no form. Sensing drawing, a line of distinction, a line of sensation, outlining a line of differentiation between left and right, upside down, bottom up. Drawing, designing, is to differentiate, to calculate, to orientate, to understand. What? La différence, l'essence de la différence, l'essence de l'espace, l'essence de l'existence. Drawing, designing, is to make sense with all senses, to make sense with the fingers, touching the world with the eye, thinking with the heart, the knee and the toe, to draw with the toe towards the not knowing yet, not knowing now yet. With the finger, the figure, the form, a fiction, the figuration, the configuration, the transfiguration. Drawing figures, figuring drawings, drawing to figure something out. As you can see or hear, I'm obviously quite fascinated by this ambivalent and liquid character of a diagram and the word drawing. Here I should like to refer to a book project which was published in 2011 in the Edition Angewandte here in this house. It's called Drawing a Hypothesis and is an artistic research on the ontology of shapes of visualization, questioning how diagrams are used in art, science, and theory. Drawing a Hypothesis addresses especially this liquid, poetic space of the diagram, the space of interpretation and the space of misinterpretation, the space of parallel readings, the space of deviation, the space of translation, the space where diagrams would not only take care of order and stability, that's the way how they are used in infographics, for example, but radically flip to a form of destabilization and discovery in a borderland between art, science, and fiction. Science as fiction, the interspace between image and word, between recognizing and naming, between the seeable and the sayable, like the emergence of new narratives and ideas, like tracing the speculative and poetic potential of diagrams, like literally drawing a hypothesis. But isn't identity a hypothesis on its own? Isn't identity a fiction too? Only preliminary and temporarily necessary? But how to identify one's liquid identity? This is being like folding a paper, like an inversion, a bit like thinking about thinking, attending to and documenting the process of production of sense in the moment of making. How to draw attention to all these occurrences belonging to the external world, and at the same time identify these experiences that exist along another plane of reality. These liquid zones of experience extend from deep within the body outwardly towards the newly emergent and not yet determined spaces, opening out into and beyond the surface of the paper upon which drawing works. How to draw liquid identities where internal and external realities are conceived as a continuum, where the body's skins no longer keeps the individual distinct from the world, but rather is considered as a precarious threshold through which new identities emerge for becoming inseparable. How to describe liquid identities? How to map liquid spaces? Which artistic methods and strategies can be developed? My various ongoing and interconnected series of art projects address the inseparable by means of expanding drawing and mapping spaces, public spaces, city spaces, spaces of memory, mapping their difference, mapping transience. Here, for example, a series of maps produced during a residency project initiated while I was studying here at the Angewandte in Damascus, in Syria, which sounds now like true fiction regarding the political situation we have today. In 2002, guided by the question, a group of students were asking, how is orientation functioning in another cultural and non-Western system? Which categories can be used to describe space, a place, a site, and a situation? Aina huna, where is here in Arabic? Reading space from the left to the right. What happens when the map is becoming the territory mapped? How to make knowledge which emerges from and oscillates around cities, urban spaces, temporary, visible and tangible, maybe by transforming the cartographic notion of what an atlas should be in relation to what cultural theorist Abi Warburg called a dynamic thought space and dynamischer Denkraum, revealing which forces shape our Western culture, maybe by an architecture of knowledge, a temporal memory space. What if we could switch on and visualize only for a moment all the ideas and information oscillating in the air, here, right now, visualizing the unseen, materializing a mnemosity? Yes, this is a paradox attempt, of course, but what happens to the space of a book when its ideas are no longer kept and formatted on the space of the page, but are becoming lines of thought in the space for constructing a new fabric of information, a multi-layered library, an analog hypertext, knowledge as a multidimensional language topography, unfolding the readability of cities as a model of the readability of cultures. But how to map time, how to map history, and how to remember? Another project which was done and realized here in the context of the Angewandte, initiated by Karen Frostig, was the project the Memory Mech Map, which is a physical and interactive digital map to engage people in the legacy of the Holocaust on the streets of Vienna. To create the map, I developed a sculptural representation of Vienna's urban layout based on letters of Jewish citizens of Vienna who tried to escape the town between 38 and 45. Therefore, I first scanned the letters coming from survivor families and then cut the text into stripes, assembling the lines of communication into a three-dimensional city map of Vienna. This fragile intimacy of the letters developed as a large-scale map delivered new insights about the massive scale of destruction to the city, the whole nation, and to the people. The letters, reading literally as pathways of remembrance, providing a direct testimony to the past, challenging viewers to imagine the lives of the writers who inhabited this city, abruptly expelled and deported from their homes. At the intersection of art and history, the memory map itself evokes the heart and soul of memory transported through time. The photos of this map were later used to implement into an app for mobile phones. Or another way of mapping the transience, a project called Traces of Spaces, I have done in Belgium, where I have lived for a while. What if the dynamics of space could be recorded and drawn by themselves as systems of self-recording, Selbstaufzeichnungssysteme, where elementary forces and agents like the wind or plants or insects become drawing tools themselves, capturing unique described movements, tiny movements, micro movements, keeping the artist's hand away from the paper. Is this the pencil of nature? Could these experiments offer a highly specific insight on the otherwise invisible traces of the invisible spaces, of non-places or non-spaces? Yes, we live in a world we have not yet learned to look at. We need to think about space, as Marc Auger has put it in his book Non-Places, an introduction to an anthropology of supermodernity. Yes, here also comes the 2-year project together with the Firefly Collective into my mind, dealing with the question of the readability of space along a Belgian highway, the N6 route connecting Brussels and Paris. In 2007, for 2 years, we started exploring this ugly transit space by hitchhiking and mainly walking by feet along the road, entering its various zones of acceleration and deceleration, zones of migration, getting lost, getting picked up by strangers. How do different modes of transportation are influencing our perception of the surrounding space? There, I literally started reading the landscape as a book. So I started collecting all the words, numbers and characters, all signs found along the road, neon signs, name plates, advertisements, street names, signposts, little notes, graffitis, and transcribe them and retype them into a text, into a dense text forming the body of the Stone Road Code book. hyperflexibility and nomadism have become the general ruling dogma of our globalized liquid modern human beings, floating through its own life like tourists, sometimes like refugees, rapidly changing places, jobs, partners, values, political or even sexual orientations, receiving and posting permanently breaking news of our highly individual milestone moments. How are these urban infoscapes permanently inscribing into our bodily perception and thus constituting inner landscapes, inner spaces of identity, and in reverse, how could these inner spaces organize again public, open, and shared spaces? How to transform these mechanisms of self-surveillance, self-optimization, paired with the permanent uncertainty and the ongoing privatization of ambivalence, as Zygmunt Bauman described it in his book Liquid Modernity. How to transform these powerful protocols into new notations of what I call psychoreographic mindscapes, in order to gain awareness, in order to generate strategies of resistance within our dynamic, hyper-liquefied spaces between egography and geography. If we assume choreography is the fundamental organization and inscription of movement in time and space, how to draw scores of these forces, which makes matter move, which makes us move, which language, alphabet, and sign system has to be developed in order to articulate these elusive, fleeting, and liquid spaces? How to resist any totalitarian and controlling power system of the panopticum by proposing alternative possibilities of autonomy, by conducting experiments of self-empowerment, Selbstermächtigung, by constructing new collective futures for initiating processes of social transformation towards a self-governance, a Selbstbeherrschung. Could we develop together new practices of cutting unknown routes through and drilling hidden loopholes into our strict neoliberal time regime? Could this still be by daily practices of rhythm analyzing the space, as Lefebvre was calling for, or by radical practices of self-awareness and shaping our attention? In reference to alternative body-mind protocols and radical scores of attention, and even new forms of body diagrams, here I would like to the ongoing research project, which I said in the beginning is a peak project, which is called Choreographic Figures, Deviations from the Line, and the University of Applied Art. It's taking place at the University of Applied Art, and in the summer there will be also workshops at the Angewandte Innovation Lab, which is a collaboration involving writer, UK-based Emma Cocker, choreographer Mariella Kreil, and me as a performer and visual artist, plus a whole team of guests, which unfolds through two interconnected aims: to attend and to explore the experience of thinking in action, what we call in reference to biologist and philosopher Francisco Varela, thinking, feeling, knowing, and in order to become aware of the dynamic vitality forces, that's a term coined by psychoanalyst Daniel Stern, operative within every artistic exploration. Secondly, to develop collectively new forms of performative notation systems for gesturing toward and making tangible this often hidden aspect of the creative process of itself. Our shared quest is towards a vocabulary that reaches beyond the conventions and protocols of each discipline. For choreography, beyond the space of the body and the space of the theater. For drawing, beyond the space of the two-dimensional page. For writing, beyond the domain of language, the regime of signification. Exploring the points of resonance between disciplinary languages through the friction and convergence of verbal, linguistic, spatial, visual, and bodily kinesthetic sensibilities. For example, we are in the process of identifying shared gestures of opening and arriving, gestures for emptying out, for clearing away, gestures for warming up, tuning in and for getting started, and gestures for generating momentum within each practice, whilst also attending to the interferences emerging through translation, the excess of meaning and moments of intranslatability. In this project, we practice space. We are becoming space, spatial, temporal entities, full of a perceptual multistability, oscillating and vibrating signs, the realm of emergences, of appearances, and here, suddenly, categorical distinctions start to collapse. Here, lines of signification become blurred. We are calling for a space where materiality, signifier, and signified coincide. Not so much a space of choreography of a body as diagram, but rather through activation and actualization, an embodied diagramming, shifting the orientation and the attention of artistic practice to the verb. Thank you.